Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm your host, Deb Philman. At The Reason We Learn, we aspire to be part of the solution. The purpose of this show is to take a good, honest, potentially painful look at the way kids are being educated. We know we can do better, and this is where we'll talk about how. Let's learn something. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. Happy Friday. So happy you're here. If you're new to the channel and interested in being part of the solution to our education crisis, I sincerely hope you'll subscribe to be notified when I make new content or host live shows like this. Please also like and share this broadcast so others can benefit from the information we're about to share. Each of these shows is an opportunity to hear from people who are working to improve education in America any way they can. And this one is no exception. John H. Wilson III became the full-time Education and Enrichment Program Director, the EEP Director, in 2006 at West Angeles Church after earning his BS in Electrical Engineering from George Washington University and enjoying a 20-year career as an aerospace engineer and years of volunteer youth work in his church and community. Under his direction for over 2 decades, EEP has grown from modest math tutoring sessions to a noteworthy educational program that has provided year-round enrichment opportunities to thousands of youth, mostly non-members of the church, from over 50 middle and high schools across the Los Angeles County area, serving more than 600 families. And he has been on this channel before. I hope when you have a chance to go back and watch our previous broadcast about what happens when math education becomes political. But today he's here to talk to us specifically about math achievement, and what's going on. And I'm just so excited he's here. So please like, share, comment, subscribe, etc. Get other people with us. And let's welcome John Wilson. Welcome. How are you today?
Great. How you doing, Deb?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to talk to you again. Our last conversation was wonderful. I learned so much, and I'm sure today is going to be no exception. I want to jump right in, John, and I want to ask you, what assumptions do people make, in particular educators, let's say, but even parents and general public? What assumptions do people make about Black students?
Oh, wow.
I know it's a big one, but I
That's a
said
big
I'm going to
one.
throw you right into the fire.
I'll try to, keep it reasonably short, and you'll
Yeah,
interrupt me and follow up too if you need to.
I will.
And I'll be able to keep this train of thought really well. It's something I've thought a lot about.
Yeah.
There's this assumption that Black students need to be from educational policymakers. And by the way, it might be mostly progressive whites, but I've seen progressive Black, also elite Blacks also do it. It's not really any one race, but there's an assumption. If you look at the federal policies too, you see it too. There's this assumption that if that that even though the educational acumen of Black students, particularly in the middle class and the low middle class and upper,
Yeah.
has improved. So we never talk about that, but there's this assumption that all of them are, and I usually change my voice here, but I will. I don't care. These poor little Black kids that are so suffering, and they're in these poor families, and they have such dead ends, and I've got to rescue them. I've got to rescue them. And so then you form policies around that, and I'm so sure that's where a lot of these policies come in. Deb, it hit me. I was coming back from somewhere. I was reading something on the plane, and it hit me. Oh wow! Right in front of me all this time. I joined together two things. I see it also in higher education, where there are these assumptions that Black students need some kind of crutch to get through, and
Yeah.
for sure there are some students that need a little more help or guidance to the university systems. But our financial aid policy has made that assumption,
Right.
that they're all just poor and needy, and that we've ignored the ones who would be that next great surgeon or
Right.
astronaut, or engineer for that matter. So I
They're
think that
diamond miners. They're diamond miners. Like, they're all diamonds in the rough, right?
yes, yes. So I think there's that assumption that all Black households are really poor and impoverished and they need our help. And when that's not true. And by the way, in those homes, there's some interesting success stories. I've seen students in homes like that because of education and the right mentorship,
Mhm.
climb right out of that.
Yep.
So there's that too. But I just want to make sure there's that assumption a lot of policymakers make. So if we do something and we implement something to make it easier for these blacks, that those black students, we have ignored the other ones who didn't need that. They needed other things. It's kind of hard to explain, but that I see that a lot in the formulation of policy, and that's what's going on. I think you'll talk to me about it later with equity math, I think.
Sure. Yeah, well, that's an interesting point that I've tried to make in the past, but it seemed to fall flat. Like people, maybe their assumption is so ingrained about the poor little, long suffering student who's underachieving and everything that they forget, Benjamin Banneker. I mean, like there have
Yeah,
been,
yeah. Hello.
black math geniuses since always, right? Hello, hidden figures, anyone. So, what about those kids who are right in front of your face, who don't need you to patronize. They don't need a pat on the head. They don't need to be
No.
assumed to need extra help. They actually need you to light the fire and to get out of their way and, give them enrichment and all kinds of things. And by the way, they come in all colors. Um, but that we, in our zeal to focus on those we perceive to be suffering,
Right.
we're ignoring
Right.
and shortchanging those who aren't.
Certainly.
And that's its own kind of oppression, I guess, for lack of a better word, in the sense that when you get in somebody's way because you assume very little of it, you're like you don't expect very much of them. Um, you're it's like you're breaking their legs and handing them crutches and going, say thank you.
Right. Right. That's
you
happening a
know,
lot, and you see it
yeah.
a lot too with the assumption of poverty. I mean, you'll hear sometimes candidates will slip and say uh, the poor and then go right to black, and they're really trying to help, but it's not helpful to
Mm-mm.
keep this image going that all blacks are poor in need of help, and that's really a problem. The great Shelby Steele writes about that a lot. That's huge in
Yeah,
his way of thinking, and mine too.
yeah,
And I've seen so much of that in the formulation of federal policies
right,
and
exactly.
state too, by the way.
Exactly. And so one of the reasons, as I understand it, that equity math, like the title of the show said, one of the reasons it kind of came into being, and if I go to like equitableMath.org or whatever and I read about it, is this basic assumption that the math achievement amongst black students, as if it's the Borg too, by the way, we forget the high achievers. It's just,
Oh, the board.
black
Yeah,
students.
right, right.
Black students are underachieving in math or disproportionately underachieving because of the way we teach math, and that the way we teach math is inequitable. Some people have even gone so far as to explicitly say it's too white.
It's too white.
When even somebody in the comments says, white people didn't invent math, and that's a true statement. It's just, in terms of mathematics, that comes out of places that decidedly were not didn't people didn't look like me.
Yeah, a lot
Um,
of different cultures. Interesting. Go
yeah,
ahead.
but I'm just saying, that how it even came to be thought of as a white discipline is beyond my comprehension. And then why anyone would perceive that sort of the knowledge based teaching of math as a progression of skills where you have to have some core skills, foundational skills, and you build on that and so forth. I was taught that way. I imagine you were taught that way. That's somehow white. That in itself is oppressive to a black student. The black student needs to be taught totally differently. To me, as a former elementary school teacher, I'm like, I had students, and I'm like, they all could learn. Like, I didn't see that. I missed that. Now, they'll say that's a reflection of my privilege and my
Mhm,
lack of cultural awareness that I
mhm.
didn't see it. But I'm gonna ask you, like, why uh, does it actually help? Do black students literally need to see math taught differently because of
Mhm. Yeah, I don't think so. I think again, there's a conflation of two different things. And I first noticed this. I mentioned this to you briefly last time, but that wasn't the focus of our discussion.
right?
Um, but there's a conflation between how do we help our black youth to think more highly of themselves and see themselves as successful, as opposed to how they do well in math. Let's get over the first one now. I think there certainly needs to be more community cultural things to let them know you're part of of an ideal here in America for success. I think you should also teach them, yeah, sure, your African roots and teach them where math came from, but that should all be, in my opinion, separate. I've always done that in our summer programs. If I do it, it's separate.
Right,
I
right.
expect them all to learn math in math class, and they can work on this other ways. Otherwise, I just did some kind of one of the newspapers called me about this mindful thing, whatever, mindful engagement, whatever. I think it's wonderful away from the classroom. Fine, if you want to do that. Now, I wouldn't do it that way, but let's do all that building up of our youth, building up of our black youth, and giving them a cultural awareness. We have some great, African American studies professors. They just need to stay in that within their discipline and not bring it into the math class. I saw a talk last summer, and it just was infuriating. I had to leave. I don't want to see, uh, anyway, you might ask me about it, but there's some very condescending math curriculum that come out of that. You might, and the students will look at each other and, why are we doing this? Why? I almost don't want it. It's shameful that people think that way. That black students can't learn until it's something black and that's a little bit. If I can be very bold here, it's a little bit racially insensitive. I find that it's racially presumptuous, racially insensitive, and some of my other friends would even say, once you're told about it and still do it, it's a little bit racist, and you wouldn't think a progressive would feel that way, but I would be that way, but it's true. So anyway, I just want to make sure I get that in there. There is a need to do this maybe, but not in the math class. Let's teach that in the African studies class. It's okay. Now again, I might not always do it that way, but that's their way to do it. And let's make math so we can take our place in the world technologically and move ahead in STEM. And we got some really sharp students in that. I don't want to see them diluted here in
Right.
California with that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I also think people forget that there's a lot of self-esteem that comes from
Yes.
achieving. So if I am better at something tomorrow than
Hmm.
I was today,
Yeah.
I'm going and can see that progress. My sense of self, my self worth, everything is going to increase. Granted, these are tiny increments, but they add up. And I think I just keep, again, because I've taught elementary school way back, in the early 90s. I just remember when I think back to when did I observe that my students seem to have the highest self-esteem, or self-regard, even in first and second grade. And it was when they went from doing something wrong or like they couldn't do something to I can do something. And they
Oh
get
man,
kind of proud of themselves. You see it every day,
I
right? You
saw
see them, they're
last
like,
night in
damn,
my
it
homework club.
works.
Yeah, I saw last
Yeah.
night. Yeah, it's been really funny getting back in person with my students in my homework club.
Yeah.
I've forgotten that boost I got from it, and it
Oh
made me.
yeah.
This is interesting. It made me understand, Deb, that sure they suffered during the pandemic not getting in person, but people like me who are defined by being with them, we suffered. It
Yeah.
is such an exhilarating thing to see a student that had no idea. We're doing parallel lines. So one student left, had no idea what to do. Point. My mother said she was crying when she left. Perfect understanding. She felt great. I felt. I'm feeling the goosebumps I felt then right now. It's to remind me
Right.
why I do this. And so that's
Exactly.
true. I didn't do. You know what? I hate to crack you up like this, but didn't cover any African culture, or I didn't tell him he was.
How
I
did
didn't
she
have to.
learn parallel lines?
Uh, and I didn't tell her that she was oppressed because I don't see her that way at all. I don't tell her that the white teacher was her oppressor. She happened to have a white teacher. I didn't say anything like that. And I don't know. I probably went
No,
too
I mean
far.
it's
I probably
and
went too far, but whatever.
no, I love it because it really gets down to the real basics. Like we people have overcomplicated things. I totally get the impulse to want to help a student who's not doing well do better. Been there, done that. I do. I still tutor kids, and you do get a sense as a teacher of satisfaction of seeing somebody make progress. But I also pick up on how good they feel. Like they
Yes.
derive a sense of self-esteem, and it's not racialized self-esteem. It's not something outside their control. Like you don't choose what your culture is, in terms of what you were born. You can choose how you express that culture as an adult, or that you can do all that, but you don't get to choose your circumstances of your birth. You don't get to choose any of that. And I hate the idea that we would teach a subject like math in a way that would reinforce any notions of helplessness. And to me, when you attach any component of skill or identity or anything that the kid is learning about themselves, okay, what can I do and who am I? And you attach it to things that are totally beyond their control. Arbitrary membership in a, arbitrary club of because you look a certain
Sure.
way.
Sure.
I don't think that could be real self-esteem. I think you get this kind of false pride that comes with like a sort of tribalism, like I'm on that team,
Yes.
but you didn't do that. You didn't build that. But you figured out how to do the math problem. You did that. And I just think if we just could teach the math, they'd already be doing better. But for some, why do you think it is then? All right, because
Hmm.
I'm hearing teachers, not teach, but
Hmm.
pedagogues, right? I'm
Hmm.
hearing them say, no, no, especially in California, this is what they need. Especially the two white women in charge out there of the framework. Anyway, but they right,
Ah,
drafting it, but
well,
they weren't in charge. Sorry. They're just cited, I don't know, dozens and
yeah.
dozens of times. But anyway, they're insisting that you and I are wrong. They're insisting that this kind of experiential, sensitive, culturally sensitive equity math that takes all these sort of social justice components and puts it into the math classroom in every
Mhm.
way, from the word problem content,
Literally, literally.
like everything, right to what you need to learn and the scope and sequence. Like,
Yes.
no,
Yes.
it's not really going to be possible for you to finish calculus by the end of high school because, reasons. I mean, I, I it is really difficult for me not to put on a tinfoil hat and feel like, do they not want them to succeed? Like it seems like you couldn't do a better job of holding people back from opportunity intentionally if you tried. So it's hard not to think that it's intentional. But why do you think they keep insisting that this is so? Where are they getting the feedback that they're right and you and I are wrong?
Oh, that's another good one. I got to be careful about time on this one. All right.
Okay.
So they get the impression, believe it or not, from many. And by the way, there's an interesting. You have to understand what's going on. Kind of like a quiet, very quiet civil war in our community on how to go forward on education. And there's an interesting issue with why that's not proceeding as quickly as some of us want to see it proceed, those conversations. So I'll have a little bit of that here. I think they're hearing it from the most elite, educated Black professors and people like that who believe that they need to make room for the students to be successful. In other words, they want their success to come easier than theirs. And they really think they're helping, and they will write papers about why it's important. And if I'm a person forming policy, regardless of race, well, these Black professors must know, and brown too, by the way, must know what's best for those students. It's kind of an academic judgment that the Black professors have made many times. Now, there are a lot of Black professors and Black teachers who don't feel that way. But right now in our community, the voices of the parents who disagree with that, they're so distracted by other things, Deb. They don't see the importance of it. And part of what I'm going to be doing in the next few months, I told Michael about it, is shaking that cage at the expense of some attention I need to put on other things. But I think I need to pay attention because I think there's a majority of Black parents who are quiet, and that causes these elite. We have such a respect in our community culturally for educated people that we don't want to cross them. We don't want to say what's best for our children. Oh wow, that's Professor so and so. Oh, he must know. And I see it in some of the pedagogy coming out. in my summer program I've worked with CSU on for years. They're coming out with some of that stuff, and I'm going, ooh, I don't think we need this stuff in the classroom to form success. But yet
Mhm.
there's a trusting in the black community of these elite ones. And then you got a whole, as you already know, culturally, we have black and brown students in single parent homes that are just not connected. These are the kids that are at risk of going on the street and not interested in school, and almost a lost generation. But that's the political considerations we kind of hit last time. All of that makes these black elite professors, and I don't say elite in a derogatory way, they're highly respected, feel
Mhm.
they have the answer and they know what these black youth need, and they want to see them get their props. And I have beliefs about why that is, but it goes to the accumulation of power. They can get an appointment and move up in the educational policy structure if they'll will agree to it. So that's what I think it is there's more to it from the angle of the community itself and that
Mhm.
fault line. We can talk about that more.
Mhm.
But that,
Yeah.
I think, is something I see a lot of. Parents are just so busy, they don't see it. And I think it must be some of the stuff is true across the line. But in suburban schools and maybe schools on our west side, there's a little more legitimacy and lack of taking this stuff in. But in our, boy, I tell you, they're throwing it in all over the place in LA and Long Beach right now. This type of equity math is creeping in. It's in the other subjects already.
Right. I imagine too that people who are placed pretty high up in the decision making hierarchy as far as policy, who are white, having spent the last at least 2 years, if not longer, being bombarded with, check your privilege and all this kind of stuff,
Yeah,
are not exactly going to be eager to
no,
contradict those voices. So
they
if,
will not. They cannot. They will not because they'll be.
yeah,
Let's put it out in the open. They'll call them racist. Those professors will turn on them in a minute. They'll say that's race. That's racist. And
yeah,
that's something we have to get to some kind of way. I don't know how. It accelerated after the Floyd murder. It
mhm,
accelerated because there was the assumption that that was racially motivated. So a
right,
whole bunch of policies were changed very swiftly during the pandemic, right under parents' noses.
yep. And it's really quite amazing how one incident, it was deemed evidence that everything needs to change, and not change a little, but like dramatically. To
Mhm.
me, that was evidence we need to retrain our police officers. We have like a serious problem with police aggression, and that's where I was starting, and I was right there
Yeah.
with people.
Hey,
I'm like,
hey.
that is a problem. We can't do that to people. But we
Mhm.
went from there to like, we need to change math. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? What?
Yeah, I almost didn't catch that. Yeah, the way it
Time
happened.
out.
Yeah. Hey,
I
hey. By the
know.
way, by the way, Deb, it's interesting you mentioned that. There is a relationship when you look at that point in time. I was sitting here thinking, I know we're a little off subject, but it relates to the changes that occurred. So I'll take that liberty for about 1.02 minutes here.
Sure.
I think that there was not enough talk of his record. He had 17 complaints and was on the street
Yeah.
in a power system there in Minneapolis where all of his leadership, most of them were black, and his union knew about this. We'll
Yes.
never ever hear about that. But I'd like to know more about why he was even on the street.
If you
I,
really care
I,
to solve the problem,
yeah,
right? Like if the goal was let's never have this happen again,
correct.
I would think you would start as close to the problem as possible and you'd work your way out following the breadcrumbs where they lead for that specific person to see, is this person gone rogue and crazy, or is this indicative of a systemic issue, rather than going, it's systemic right at the we know it's systemic, and not only is it systemic, it's the United States of America. It's like the whole everything
Yeah.
about America is wrong.
And then you had that 7 to 8 minutes, Deb.
Yeah.
I think we're arguing about how long the video was these days. I
Yeah.
just dropped out of that argument. But anyway, where the visual of seeing that, those are the 7 minutes to 8 minutes that changed, that gave them the opening to
Right.
start changing curriculum, which they wanted to do before, but it didn't work out.
Well, yeah,
And it was during the
perfect excuse.
pandemic, we were all locked down. They just did it. So
Exactly. So Michael's asking, he says, care to say anything about Jelani Nelson speaking up? Where does he stand in this divide?
Oh,
Now,
let's give it
remind
to us.
me who he is. I don't want to
He,
pretend I know who
he's
he
a
is when I'm
professor out
only
of
vaguely aware.
he's a black professor, I think, out of Berkeley. There's a
Okay.
lot of opposition at Berkeley to this framework. I like Jelani.
Hmm.
I want to meet him so bad. But I stopped trying, but I wish Michael would keep bugging me. I want to talk to him so bad, and I don't even have a. I just want to talk to him. I think he definitely does not would agree with me on this perspective of stop thinking of these kids as oppressed. I really think that Deb, I know he would agree because I read other stuff. I followed his. I got to be careful my wording against Avery's. They'll stir Avery up. I I've watched his discussions. How about that? About Joe Bowler and about her approaches, and I don't think Jelani agrees with that. Now, I think
Right.
Jelani probably would want to see a framework that addresses the cultural concerns. But
Hmm.
I'd love to talk to him about my idea of it being separate. I wouldn't even have a problem. To show you how I want to win in the classroom, Deb. I'm just thinking of this right now. I would gladly agree to 1 hour of mindfulness and social justice, and that takes a lot for me to say that. By the way, if we
Right.
just keep the math and the English and the history, math right now we're talking, and
Yeah.
readings bother me too. Anyway, keep it clean, keep it math. And I bet
Right.
Jelani would agree. I would like to ask him that. That's my
Well,
full
and the
answer, Mike.
and the topic I think of social justice needs to be made a little less I don't know what the right word would be, but right now the if we accept the premise that there are problems, that we have social problems in the United States that
Sure,
require attention, social
sure.
scientists to take a look at. Okay. I quibble with the term justice because to me it was
Me
attached to
too.
that as a form of like revenge kind of thing. Whereas I think if we're all interested in improving the lives of people whose lives are less than optimal, okay, let's agree with that. I think we all decent feeling humans would agree with that, that it would serve that purpose, not the purpose of political parties and activist organizations trying to raise money, but it serve the purpose of people who genuinely want to solve problems, to bring in different voices with different perspectives on what it would look like, what would improvement look like. You'd have equal parts Thomas Sowell and Kimberly Crenshaw or whatever. Like you'd have different perspectives and
Sure.
you guys could debate it and haggle it and talk it out. And
That's a
then
dialogue that's not being had, but go ahead.
it's not being had. It's like very one-sided. And so Michael's reminding us here that Jelani's the one who spoke up about no black people being involved in writing the California math framework, and he got into a Twitter beef with Joe Bowler.
That's
Now, for
right.
those
That's what it was. Right.
right, for those watching who may be going, Deb, who's Joe Bowler? What are you talking about? Or what a math framework? Okay. The proposed California math framework is something they do. Is it like every couple years? I don't know how many years it go by before they try to do a new one, but it's sort of a framework of how math will be taught in California public schools. It involves, talking about scope and sequence as far as, who takes what courses, when, what order, and so forth, as well as the
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
methodologies and pedagogies that will be used to teach the subjects, when, how, and what kind of lesson plans. Now, it's not mandated in the sense that if the state adopts it and said, this is the framework, each district still gets to say, yeah, but no, we're not going to do it that way. They do have that, autonomy as far as that goes. But most will probably go along with it. That's typically what happens. Certainly, LA, the Los Angeles School District probably would. Um,
Oh yeah. Long
and
Beach. I'm learning Long Beach would now. I was surprised.
yeah, but you have places like Burbank and places like that have already said, yeah, we won't do it.
No, we
We're
ain't
going to
doing
do it
that.
our
Beverly Hills is not doing that.
Beverly Hills won't do it, et cetera. They do things their own way. And so the writing of this framework was done by, as I understand it, like dozens of people. I mean, it's not just two people. However, Joe Bowler, professor at Stanford University, and then her partner in crime, I can't remember the woman's name.
Uh,
Anyway, it's not important. Anyway, she was the researcher cited most. She was one of the writers, and she was also cited as a reference. Her
Yeah.
research was cited more times than anybody else's research in the writing of this. It's felt a little like a self-licking ice cream cone. She also happens to have her own program for which, she charges money. Anyway, but it seemed a little weird, and there were no Black people involved in writing it. So for
Yeah.
all that it goes on about it's going to provide equity and the more marginalized and the oppressed, and Jelani steps up and goes, "Well, that's fascinating. If that's your like number one concern, it is interesting that you didn't include any Black writers in the
Well,
framework."
yeah, that's right. There weren't, and let me just say what I was more concentrating on. I noticed that it would have to be approved by the California Department of Education board, and there are two, you know, very highly thought of Black elites on there, and one wouldn't even take my calls when she found out what it was about. I really think that they're part of what I told you before. I think they knew they could get it blessed by the board and the
Yeah,
Blacks on that board, and then that would certainly be. I mean, you got a superintendent of schools for the state, Thurman. He's a well thought of Black man as well, and
yeah,
I think he's really deeply in favor of it too. So there's a lot of structural support for putting math equity into a math classroom. I can assure you of that. So, but you're
right.
right. The formers of the framework, didn't. There are no Blacks among them for sure. So, but yet they're speaking for the Black community. Well, see, why not just come in the Black community and the Hispanic too, and have some forums where we discuss it, and I'll bring my parents out and just let them talk to you about what they're seeing. That's what needs to happen. But I don't think I hope we get to that, but I don't think they will. It'll come out, and like you said, some districts will do it, some won't, and you may have parents protesting, pushing back in the districts that do it. It'll be a little more than they thought they would get. I think like here in Long Beach or somewhere.
Right. Well, now I have a question that might be a little controversial, but I'm just going to go ahead
That's
and
all
ask
right. Let
it.
me have it.
Okay. One of the things that I believe is statistically true is that
Mhm.
Asian students tend to do the best out of all. If you're going to disaggregate the data, you'll see that achievement of Asian students, even during the pandemic, theirs was the only that went up. I mean, everybody else is like
You're
flatlined
right.
or went
All of them
down.
even the white ones went down
It
some.
went down, but the Asian achievement went up, and we know that they do spend a lot on tutoring and private classes and things like that. But I can't help but feel, especially when you look at the amount of violence against Asians
I know.
during the last, several years, when
I
you
know.
look at just the way that Asian achievement is talked about, the way that Asian students are lumped in with white students, like white adjacent and all this.
Yes.
Sometimes they don't even disaggregate them, which is bizarre because that makes it look like white students are doing even better. It's weird. But
Right. I've seen all that.
do you think that subconsciously, on the part of some of the like, let's say the guy who heads up the board, I don't put words in his mouth, if he could have nothing to do with this, I'm just saying, do you think there's any sentiment that by implementing a framework that makes it harder for people to complete calculus within the school system or to excel within the school system, in other words, to force people to have to pay separately or go into things separately, that this will kind of put those people back in their proper place?
I
That
think
there's
people
a
think. I
a
think
little
people.
bit of that?
Yes. People think that. I have some Asian families in my program.
Mhm.
I feel based on what I know about them, if that happened in their school, they'll have them on. I wish I could remember that website where you can get AP courses online. They
Right,
have them in 2-year college, and by the way, I'm pushing 2-year college a lot more now.
right.
Anyway, they'll get around them. See what happens, Deb. I'm sure glad you asked me this. I think what happens is that in the Asian community, they're more alert to other ways to get what they need for their students. They're
Mhm.
just more aware, and I think it's cultural. I think it's that they how they regard education. I've had Asian students tell me face, "I have to get this or they'll kill me." And I don't think they're really gonna get killed, but there's a I'm laughing because there's a SAT. I'm an SAT teacher, and there's a lesson where one of the answers is he's gonna kill him, and it's not the answer because it's extreme. But so
Right,
I don't think it's gonna kill him, but I think that there's such a high fear of not being accepted if they don't succeed, and
right.
and I'd love to study that historically and whether it's ancient, whether it's something I greatly admire. Actually, to tell you the truth, I do admire it, but without the psychological effect on the students. So
Right.
I think that they would. I think my Asian parents, I noticed when they get to me, they already know different resources, and the way I support them is different. I help them judge between the resources. Whereas my best black parents need me to tell them about resources totally. So there is
Right.
a sense that they would just shift over and do something else and get around it that way. Now the thing that bothers me though is those high performing or high ability or high potential black and brown students therefore don't get that opportunity. And these are
That's
coming
goes
from
back to your assumption that they
yeah.
don't exist. It's like they're invisible.
I don't know what it hello, we're here. I bet that's
Exactly.
2/3 of them. I bet that's 2/3 of it. And by the way, from that group, which has grown, is where you're gonna get your most successful blacks in society, blacks and brown students in society.
Yeah.
And I I think it's gives us hope for tomorrow if they can have the same opportunity. And a lot of
Right.
black families, let's say meet someone like me, they don't learn they can take it in 2-year college or they should do a
Right.
prep class before calculus
Right.
or you can
Right.
learn calculus. I wish Michael's probably laughing at
That's
me,
true of a
but
lot of
there's a
parents. I've
mhm,
parents come to me and I tell them about things like early college. I tell them about community college and dual enrollment. I
mhm.
tell them about all different ways to get college credit and to get ahead so they can be in the sophomore classes without doing the AP, which is high stress.
Well,
And if you
I
don't
don't maybe we should talk about that separately. I totally don't advise that these days.
right, it's high stress and
Too
then
much.
you have to get the score on the test. If you don't get the score, you don't get the credit, but if you go to the
Correct.
college route, you get the credit. So it seems like a no-brainer, but so many parents are like, "I never knew about this. This
They
is
have
a
no
thing?"
idea. They have no
And I'm like,
idea.
"Yeah. Yeah,
They have
this is a
no
thing."
idea.
They have no idea. And you're right about I sort of jokingly say because all my tutoring students during the pandemic and even now, they're Chinese Americans. And I help kids with their college essays and things like that. And I jokingly say, I think I'm on the Tiger Mom calling tree because I don't advertise.
Yeah,
But what
you
happens
do.
is like my friend so and so sent me to you because of the and I'm like, but you helped her daughter get into college. And I'm like, nice to meet you. Okay, this is great. But that's how it's been happening is they are seeking out and making sacrifices. But when I look at the framework and then I look at the data and I see the numbers and I think the the people hurt, as you said, are the high flyers who are black. Well, all high
Mhm.
flyers.
But
But
then you
you
get mhm.
claim to be helping. If you claim to be helping minorities get ahead, you're hurting the high flyers who are minorities. So whether they're Asian, black, or brown, it kind of doesn't matter. They're being cut off at the knees by something like the framework or something like equity math that basically treats it as though, like you said, we got to stop and have a drum circle while while
Yeah.
we're talking about multiplication or whatever the heck. And obviously I'm exaggerating, but you know what I'm saying? And that just slows people down. It really does because while you're as you said, instead of having that outside the classroom or in a separate program,
Which is okay. That's all right.
and
Whatever.
but here's the thing. Their argument is the other students need to learn it too. So in other words,
Oh, no.
it's not enough for the black students to
Right.
learn about and feel good about their culture. We need to have the Asian and the white students also learn this way because then it will be equitable. So it's not, they
Right.
don't see it as equitable to have the black and brown students learn the same
No.
way the Asian and the white students
Oh,
have
no,
been
no, no.
learning
That's not
for
equitable.
millennia.
Yeah, but that goes back to that they're oppressed, so we gotta treat them differently. Remember, Deb? Hey, look, you said a couple things that really hit me in a way that has maybe hit me before, but not in this way. I noticed that even with if we talk about achievement of those students, there are students I have that are in that middle kind of area that we're going to be able to help that are also hurt. In
Yeah.
other words, I didn't really develop to know I want to do engineering till I got further along, really my freshman year of college. So
Yeah.
so there's that too, and now that has to be addressed as well. Now, the fact is that black middle class families may not know about stuff happening as much, which is
Mhm.
why we got to continuously be bombarding them with these pathways and these approaches. A lot of times, other Asian or even white families They know this stuff. They know where to go. Now, another thing you cracked me up just now. I tried to keep from laughing. I think I did. You were so right about. I now understand why I got this comment from a parent. I'm naive sometimes. So, so I always say black, as you know, because I learned that we have African Americans too. We have Ethiopian,
Yeah.
Eritrean, etc. Well, they found my program about 3 years ago, and I suddenly started getting a whole bunch of great Eritrean. And there's some similarities between them and Asian culture, by the way.
Very much so.
And they
Yes.
want the best for their students. I love working with them. They're tremendous. I like to work with my Black American parents too, but it's like a different feel. It's very interesting, and so they will come in and pretty much do whatever's needed to get their students where they need to be. So first I got one, now I'm getting like, and you say, well, how'd you hear about me? Well, so and so. How'd
Yep.
you hear about me? So and so. And I
Yep.
get it with Hispanic too, Asian too, but a lot with them. So now I have like maybe 20 African
Yep.
I call them African Americans because
They
they
because they
are.
literally are, right?
That's why I say black.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, but it's accurate at this point. But I think it, what I want to know though is you talk to a lot of parents. And what is the feeling you get as far as how aware are they that the way their students are being taught in school is contributing to their lack of achievement? In other words, that if the kid, let's say the kid is getting a B in math in their school and they come
uh,
into your program and you look at that B and then you look at their skills and you go, that's not a B, that's really a C or C
I've seen
minus.
that a lot now after the pandemic. Go ahead.
Right? And you see that the skill and the grit, it's like it doesn't match. And the parent is bringing it to you, go, I just want to take the B to an A. And they're just here to just like, round out the edges and everything's good. And you have the unenviable task. I've had to do it many times of going back to the parents and saying, yeah, so actually, like, they don't really know what they need to know to be doing the
Right.
thing they need to be doing. And do you get I've got this. I've had parents going, "But that can't be true. They have a B." That's
Yeah.
but it says
Yeah.
the teacher says,
You
or
can't.
do you
Yeah.
how
You
do
can't.
you
You can't get to them until you get an opening. The best openings I see is when they want something else, and I got a chance to tell them that's a problem. Like for example,
Mhm.
if I have some students that have writing issues, and
Yeah.
I told the parents early on. Now I have them doing their college applications, and it's taking us a month to do one essay because
Oh,
their
dear God.
writing skills are not. That's an opportunity, and I never miss it. I'll tell the parent, "Hey, we've got to shorten the college list. They're not going to get through these." Oh, why is that? Because their writing is not up to par. Oh, really? And I'll say to them, this summer they need to take a writing class. And every year they actually end up doing that, and they shorten the list. It's only when they see they need something else. But you're right. Hey, I already got a B. I just want an A. That's not going to be enough motivation. Now, what might jolt them is if they go, well, because they got an A in algebra 2, they can take this new course, Michael was talking about the other day online. They can take AP pre-calculus.
Oh,
N-
God.
And
And
then
you're
they
like, "No, no, 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 that's not a real A."
and I'll encounter them when they start to get the first 2 classes and they're struggling, and I go,
Yeah.
"I think you should put them in a regular pre-calc. Remember last year? Bam." Then they'll listen. So I don't think they'll listen. I don't think a parent will listen to them. I think it's
I've
hard
seen it
for
with
them.
reading. I've seen kids 3 and 4
Yes.
grade levels behind, and I try to explain to them, they're like, "No, they
Oh
can't
my goodness,
do
goodness.
this." And
I
what
feel so
I've s
bad too when I'm in SAT class. I do SAT too, and
yeah.
I tell the students to read. We take turns reading as we go through the lesson, and I realize, ooh, and that always correlates to their inability to do the comprehension too.
100%.
It
And of
correlates. So
course,
they
if they
can't
don't have
read it, then
background
yeah,
knowledge, their
right,
comprehension suffers too.
right.
Now, but so if you try to approach the parents, um, who want them, who are saying like, okay, John, what do I do? I want my kid to actually really understand the math." And if you try to explain that they need to either relearn something that they were supposed to learn and didn't learn, or that the way they're being taught, obviously you're not going to like diss the school,
Oh
but if
yeah,
you say like, I think that they need a different method, or I think they need to learn something different, or if you were to be asked directly, like, well, what do you think about the equity math something? How
okay. I'll tell you
receptive
about that. Yeah,
how receptive are they to your opinion that this isn't really what your child needs. And this isn't going to fix, if like there are parents I'm sure that you encounter who agree that there's racism, and like sort of, in other words, a progressive, they're on board with the notion that this is a systemically racist school system, et cetera,
Yeah.
and so forth. They come to you for tutoring, and you you know, you want to tell them something, and it contradicts their notion of the reason my child is not doing well is racism. How
Yes.
receptive are they?
Yes. Ah, boy, that's a big one too. So we got two situations that I got to bring up here that I'm aware of. So one is the whole thing of, and I think I'm almost sure this. I'm almost making conclusions on this, but I think some parents only care about just getting the grade up, like you said earlier.
Yeah, I
And
see
I
that a lot.
discover there's issues as far as equity math itself. I started talking about this a year and a half ago, which is how I found the math group, right? I heard
Yeah,
about the framework and went off and on some YouTube, and it went semi-viral, whatever. A whole bunch of people saw it, and that's how they found me. But only now parents are coming to me and saying, "When did this happen?
yeah,
Why are they spending a half hour a day on mindfulness?" And I think
yeah,
about Joe Bowler all the time when I see that. I go, "Oh, Joe Bowler, her ideas are spreading." And then I have a situation right now. I got a student who's failing pre-calc, and the well, what? Let me see your notes. This is amazing. I said, "Let me see your notes, Kai." We were on online tutoring, right? And she said, "Oh, well, I'll take a picture of them." So she sends the picture over, and I'm seeing this. They're learning about the history of Black culture and math. They're learning about
in
the social.
pre-calc.
They're seeing get in pre-calc. They had this example, and it rang a bell because I saw it in the summer program training I went to at CSU, where they showed all these slave routes. This is crazy. All these slave routes from Africa, and they were doing some kind of probability of it landing where, and I'm like, this is just overreach. And I said, "Well,
So
how often do you?"
contrived.
I said, "How often do you come?" I said, "How often?" This is a pretty good. I thought it was a pretty good public high school, but those ideas are coming
Oh,
in.
God.
It's coming into a pre-calc class. Now, fairness to her, I said, "Is she testing you on this?" "Oh no, we just discuss it in groups." I said, "How do you feel when it's over?" She says, "I'm so anxious because I don't know how to do this." And then she showed me the graphing stuff. They were doing families of curves, the x squared, the different curves and how to transformations. Anyway, I thought that was astounding. That happened a month ago, right after school started, and it made me remember the CSU program that I work with, which I'm probably not going to work. Well, if they see this, they'll learn right now.
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to work with it next year because I felt really funny, kind of trying to implement some of that stuff. And to your point, and I want to hear what you think about this. And I don't think I've ever told Michael this either. There was a question from one of the other site providers, not me, and said, "We have primarily Native American and Asian. Can we do a form of cultural math for them?" I said, "Ooh, I can't wait to hear the answer." And they said, "No, we want everybody to learn this African cultural math." They wanted everybody to learn it, so we all learn the same thing. I didn't know how to react to that. I I kind of like when it was over, I went and asked them. I said, "Hey, did she answer your question? Did he answer your question?" They said, "Oh yeah." I said, "What are you gonna do?" This will crack you up. I said, "What are you gonna do?" They looked at each other. I said, "Come on, you can tell me. We're gonna do what we want to do anyway." I said, "Oh, good for you." But the fact is, CSU wanted to hear comments on it,
Yeah.
and wanted us to have them fill out exercises. I told my guy that was there, we're not doing any of this. I wasn't even going to do it. We're
It's,
not doing any of this.
it reminds me of a school district in New Jersey, Cherry Hill School District. They adopted a couple years ago an African American curriculum. So in addition to your standard Black History Month, which, I agree with everyone that, a month for Black
Fine,
History, like, just embed it
fine,
in the history class,
fine,
okay?
fine,
Black history is American history. It's the same.
fine. That's okay.
But but they wanted this program and you have to take it to graduate. But the population of Black students in the district is really, really, really small.
So what's
And
gonna
so,
happen? I gotta hear
and
this.
they,
I can't
and
wait to
they,
hear
and,
this.
but the population of lots of other like immigrant cultures, Jewish culture, they're actually the percentage of Jews in this district is very high.
How
There are all
about
kinds of
that?
things and all kinds of things. And so people were asking, like, how come we don't have a such and such studies and another such and such study and another study? And of course, same answer. Same answer. It's like, no, we have to do this because reasons,
Yes,
historically marginalized cultures. And it's like, wait, I think Vietnamese, blah, blah, blah. It's like these people are not exactly, Chinese. And it just wasn't a very satisfying answer for the parents who were asking, like, why, and understand that when they're doing this African American studies, it's not like you will go to African American studies class like you might in college or even a high school elective.
sure.
They're imbuing it in every subject, just like you said with math. It's in math, it's in science. So she's been sending me lesson plans, and we're now at what, November? And it's like, they're still talking about slavery. They've been talking about slavery since first day of school, in
You
math,
know,
in English, in history, in everything. It is just all day slavery, 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 slavery. You would think nothing else has ever happened to Black people in America. Not to belittle it, but you would think they're like, nothing else has occurred.
yeah,
It's like
that's
this many months on
yeah.
slavery?
And think about it. Always think about it from the other end of these I don't know how to say. We didn't really give it a name, but I'm gonna try. Okay, these higher performing Black students and higher potential Black students, they think it's condescending. They've
Oh,
told me
yeah.
there was a lesson that was included in this one equity math program that we were working with last summer that they had a lesson with cornrows and circles in the hair, and it was forming some kind of paraloid or some kind of cuboid thing, and they were going to calculate the lengths of the rings. And I felt it was condescending to say that, well, all Black kids grow hair like this, or and that isn't even a thing now. My students told me that's like they felt real funny. I know I wasn't going to do that. I told them we're not doing that. I told my number one was right there. I said, hey Larry, we're not doing that. He said,
It
really?
just
He said, how
feels
can you not
so
do it? It's in the grant. We're not doing that.
it just feels like what people would come up with if they were trying to imagine what something would be like that they totally don't understand. It's like it seems the opposite of culturally sensitive. See, because even within subcultures and like ethnic cultures, religious culture, other different there's wide range of adherence. There's the diversity of different kinds of traditions. Like just take Jewish culture for example. I mean, some people are very observant. Some people eat these foods, some
Perfect
people eat
example.
those foods.
Perfect example.
This notion that, well, everybody eats soul food, don't they? There was an episode of
Yes, exactly.
Saturday Night Live when my husband and I were talking about it today, and he said, you remember this one where this Black family is looking at an apartment and the realtor is trying so hard to show how not racist they are. They're like, hey, the nearest soul food restaurant is like 2 blocks away, and I'm pretty sure there's a Jefferson fan club in the building. Like things like this, and the family's just standing there looking at each other like, are they okay? And this is how I feel about
That is
equity math.
yes. If the listeners may know, anybody who knows that movie Groundhog Day,
Yes.
I've done a lot of training of youth with that movie. And I actually, do you remember the scene where he keeps coming back to try to get it perfect to marry
Yeah.
her, and it gets worse and worse? I
Yes.
kind of feel it's that way there. It's getting worse and worse, and they keep doing that.
Yeah, it's
So
like,
that's
"Oh,
what
yes, and now
that.
I read
Yeah, yeah,
French
yeah. He says,
poetry."
"Oh, look, look, see, look, look, look." He tries to do everything, and she
Yep,
goes, "Ooh, ooh," every time he comes back.
that's a good example, and I just feel like, we're not in trying to anticipate students' every possible sensitivity. I
Yes,
feel like we're missing the number one thing that is shared by all students, which is, I want to learn. I want to do well. I want to be able to do the thing that you're asking me to do without massive discomfort and confusion. And so I don't end up at the end of the day like I'm so confused and I don't know how to do it. Like your student who said, how'd you feel about the end of it? I don't know how to do it. So like
yeah,
we had a conversation about whatever. And so it's almost like they go so far to try to understand they don't understand anything. And it's that people are people are people, and children to a certain degree are children. And when you put them in a situation where like you got to be there, you got to go to school. It's not optional. They're not there because they want to be. They're there, and that's their job, right? Their job is to like do the work or learn. And then they'll take the other thing they do is say, "What's about engagement, Deb? They need to be engaged."
Yeah, I hear that a lot too. Yes.
Engagement. And of course, engagement is I want to look in the little tiny sliver of a window, I, the principal or whoever, and I want to see hands moving. I want to see busyness. I want to see people talking. This is engagement. Oh, look how engaged
Yeah,
they are.
engagement, right.
Whereas most real learning, especially when you talk about math, really learning math, is very quiet. It's quiet. Your head is down. You're doing problems.
Mm.
You're doing computations. You're doing things. Maybe you have a short conversation with somebody. Then you're doing. It's quiet in a math classroom where people are engaged and learning math and doing math. It's not a noisy place. Unless I suppose you're building things, okay? But if you're literally learning algebra or calculus or pre-calc, even trig, I don't think that's a noisy, busy place wherever, but you could look in from a distance, go, oh, look how entertained they are. Look how engaged they are. Tell you what, in a quiet classroom where kids are all getting it, where the teacher can stand at the front and say, all
Exciting.
right, who's got the answer to number 5? Let's go.
Exciting.
And the kids
Exciting.
are like, me,
Yes.
me, me. That's what engagement looks like. But they got it all like weird.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think that they're all into see, I think a good it just hit me this way, but because I'm kind of an organically, if I'm good math teacher, it's kind of organic. In other words, I adjust to the class I have,
Right.
and I make it interesting for them while I'm teaching them. I think things like we don't teach things. I don't even know if it's in a school and a credential. I don't know. I feel like inflection of voice. I feel sense of humor. I feel
Yes.
listening. I feel letting them do. I feel those are things that cause them in an enrichment program to come back and get A's.
I
Whereas they don't, and they'll
totally
say all
agree.
the time, the parents will say, they'll come and sit in. I let them sit in all the time. They'll say, "Boy, that was a crazy way to teach that." But I never seen a teacher do that. His teachers don't do that. I wish his teacher would do that. And I think it's more parents would like to see more engagement. And the word engagement is funny. I stole it. I hijacked it. They want to see the teacher doing those kind of things like you were describing. They want to
Yeah.
see that's how learning occurs. And that's exciting to me. That's an exciting moment but right, when they're learning is serious, it's quiet, but boom, you could explode to that place where
You can't
they know
always
they're learning.
judge from the outside. That's what I'm saying. It's like you can't
No.
measure engagement by looking at how busy the hands are or whatever. And to your point too, that teaching to me is kind of much more like art or art
Yes,
form
it's an art.
than it is like, a practice where you have a script and you do the thing. And the thing is, I realize that, the graduate schools and the research programs, the idea that you get, it's like, what are you going to get a master's and what are you going to write for your PhD? What are you going to do? If you can't come up with like praxis and all
Right,
kinds of little things to do, what are
right.
you gonna do? Say, yep, same way we did it last year. Yep, same way that well, I can't tell you how to do it. You either have it or you don't.
Mhm.
Like that doesn't really sell degrees in
No,
school. That
no.
doesn't really like how do you recruit for that? So I think the fact that we have the system that we have that calls upon credentials and somebody needs to sell the credentials, the university, and so on and so forth, and you need to publish to get the credentials. It kind of creates a system that ends with very dry
Yes,
teaching that then calls for activities. Like so because the teacher isn't really a teacher, they're more like an activities coordinator. And well, this activity had them very engaged. We're super entertained and look at how much they were playing and doing stuff. And then of course, you go take a test at the end and like, do they know it? Well, they were super engaged, but they don't understand math. And
mhm,
you and I come from that old school way of, if you love your subject, you personally are good at your subject, right? Because it usually hard
right.
it's hard to like love
Start
something
there.
you're bad
Start there.
at.
That's right.
Right? So you love it, you're good at it, it makes you smile. You go with that energy into a classroom. It's infectious. You like you said, you
Right,
meet the kids where they are in terms of mood, in terms of
right.
vocabulary and inflection. And but you how do you hire for that? How do you train for that? How do you do that? And we just don't have a system that incentivizes the recruitment of that and value it for that. We're treating teachers almost like they're factory workers, and the kids are like their particular products. They're like little people widgets to be, make them do this, make them
You're
do
right.
that. And I think we've gone so far down the rabbit hole in that direction that people can't pull themselves out because it would like undo their livelihood. Like they were like, well, what would I do for a living? What would I do? What would the university do? What would the graduate school of education do? What would Joe Bowler do? What literally, what would her job be? Because I think we could safely say she's not a math teacher. But
Yeah. Right.
what, what would she do if she couldn't opine theoretically on what people need to learn? And then you got people like you who are natural, like you said, you're just like, I know what my kids need because I'm actually connecting with the students. Like
Yeah, absolutely.
they're individual human beings in front of my face, and I figure out what they need and I give it to them. And they can't sell a book for that.
Yeah, and those kind and they can't sell a book for that. Like that's right. And they also, it's doubtful that they can understand how to really fix the problems with black and brown students in the inner city, how they can learn. They think there's some program they can provide that will fit all. And that reminded me of there was an EdSource article about this big dilemma that our 2-year colleges are having. And
Yeah.
I'm going to try to, and it's a straight face, tell you their dilemma. The dilemma was they're wondering, we need more black professors who look like these students for them to make it, which
They still
sounds
say that.
good, and
Yeah.
and certainly we should have more. But the sophistry is that that will suddenly make it better,
Right.
and we haven't worked on the actual reasons why. Have you surveyed those black students? I don't know if it was brown. I think it was it was only black. And so I
Right.
wrote the writer, and I said, well, here's why that just getting more, saying just get more won't work. Number one, in the black community, the teaching profession and the police profession are not highly thought of. So you're not going to pick, you can't get enough that way all the time. These two professions, I know we haven't had a lot of time to talk about this, are not
Yeah.
highly thought of in the black community. And
That's interesting. I was
yeah,
not, oh, I know
no,
police for sure. But I
no.
mean, but I was not aware of that about teachers.
It, it's
Once
it's
upon
it's
it.
like this. It's kind of like this. I never have a student, very rarely has told me, I want when I talk to them every time before I do that. I go over there in their readiness conference, the kind of colleges they should look at. Very, very, very few. There's one exception said, I want to be a teacher. It comes out,
Interesting.
it comes across later. It's not thought of, a lot of them want to be, physical therapists and sports medicine, and they want to do things related to entertainment and athletics. And this is something that is something we could only work in our community, I think. They definitely don't want to go in law enforcement, and
Mhm.
because they're scared people will talk about them. And I have young people who've become police officers later and working for the police department. They share with me that they're ridiculed in their community. So not the whole subject,
Oh,
but if
they
you
do
want to have a
dramatize that on television quite a bit. They do make that part of storylines, so I'm
right. I don't
aware
know if you watch
of that.
there's a certain popular show that plays on that a lot, and it's necessary. I hope people see it. It's a big dilemma for police officers
Mhm.
to do that, and I think the same thing happens with teachers. I
Mhm.
think people don't want to say students view it as that's the man. I don't know if I want to be a teacher,
That's a
but a lot of them
shame.
come back to me later and want to be teachers, and I
I
help them.
see.
But
Well,
it's interesting that's an initial.
I frankly think all teachers should have to go do something else first
So maybe that's okay.
and then come back. And the reason I say that is that, it's kind of like working in, anytime you're in a position of power over other people, and you really are as a teacher, you have a position of power and authority. I think it's important to go where you're sending those people. And the military understands this,
Mm,
and do that job, right? Before you get put or go out into the world, out of that. Kids spend their whole life in academia. You're like 13 years, you're in school. And then if you go, go to college. So if you spent 16 years or so as a student, and now you got to go back and be in charge of students. You've never
yeah,
been out in the so-called real world where you're supposedly
right.
preparing people to go. How can you prepare people to go somewhere you've never been? You've
True.
literally never been there. You never
True.
had to earn a living. You didn't have to do that. You just went in a big circle. I don't think that's healthy. And I would, obviously prefer. Now, Michael's asking, was
Oh,
there a time when that low regard for teachers in the Black community was different?
yes, I want to remember that question, but I want to say something to the point of why we brought this up, and
Yeah.
that is the assumption that you need a black teacher or black students can't respond is a little racially insensitive. I've had students do very well with all races of teachers. I'll make sure I got that out. Anyway, and so I
Well,
think that's
but
what
I want to
racial
address
issue.
that
Yeah.
because I had an issue with my daughter, my middle daughter's last public school. They were in a few years ago. They were in a charter school before they got pulled out for homeschooling again. And my daughter got in the car one day and she said, "Mom, I'm really upset." I said, "What's going on?" And she was in, I think, seventh grade. She said, "We're reading a book and it's about a young Hispanic boy, and there's an immigrant boy that
Hmm.
comes into school and he helps him, whatever. And I was told not to see these characters as individuals, but to see them as members of groups." And she said, that can't be right. Because, of course, in our household, we talk a lot about treating people as individuals, right? Not as members of groups. And she was very upset about that. She said, I don't see people that way. I don't want to see him that way. She said, these two kids are very different. She said, one, I think, is a hero to the other. She's telling me things that I probably would have thought too if I read the book. I'm like, sounds like you're right. And I said, but are you sure you understood the teacher correctly? Because I first want to make sure that you are repeating this correctly. So I asked for a meeting with the teacher. But nothing ever is just you and the teacher anymore. It's you, the teacher, the director of the school, whatever. You got to get they gang up on you. So I was in there with the director of the middle school, who was Black, the teacher, who was white. And yet we're talking about brown kids in this book, and then my daughter.
Hmm.
And I said, I just want to clarify something. My daughter said X. Is that true? And the English teacher was
Okay.
just, yes, that is absolutely correct. That is what I taught them, and that is correct. And I
Mm,
said, is
mm,
it correct or is it your opinion? I said,
mm.
because I'm not sure I agree. And so we had a little discussion. It was very civil, but I said, I'm really concerned. What's the message to students if you begin in seventh grade and you tell them that an individual character in a book is representative of a group? Are you not stereotyping? Are you not? So he said, well, this young boy didn't have access to the education because he didn't speak English because he was Hispanic. And we need our students to understand the inequitable access that children who are, of Spanish and Mexican. And I said, you're
Oh, here we
lumping
go.
them all into a group. You're stereotyping. I don't think this is healthy. So the Black director of the school piped up and she tells me her truth, her lived experience. She says, let me share with you my lived experience of being a college student at a college where only one of my professors in my discipline, I said, not only at the college, she goes, no, but in my area of study, I can't remember what it was, only one of those professors was Black and looked like me. And she said, I only had one person I could go talk to my entire college career. I said, that's not true. She said, what do you mean? Are you telling me what my experience is? I said, no, I'm saying you, it sounds like you didn't give your white professors a chance. If you said I only spoke to the professor who looked like me and therefore I only had one person to talk to for 4 years, that you made that choice. Were there other professors there? Yes, but they were white. I'm like, so that ruled them out. They were
Hmm.
white, so you could not seek them out for mentorship or learning outside of the classroom. Only your Black professor. If I wanted to know what it was like to be a Black woman and blah 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 blah, and I was like, okay, yes, you're right. A white person could tell you what it was like, but that Black woman could only tell you what it was like to be her.
Hmm.
She couldn't tell you what it was like to be all Black women.
Yeah,
There's not such a thing as a Black woman in America. Like there's
that's so
that woman's
true.
experience. That's it. I can't tell you what it's like to be a white woman in America. Even though I am one, I'm not all of them. So, but
Right.
she took such offense. She's like, I cannot believe you're telling me about myself. I said, I'm not. I'm simply observing the fact that it is not accurate as a fact, a statement of fact, to say you had no one else to speak to. You had other people to speak to. You chose not to because they didn't look like you. You made that choice. And now what
Yeah.
you're saying is that our students should be taught to make the same choice so that
Yes.
my white daughter is going to grow up and think the only people she can talk to and relate to are white. And that shut them up right quick. They were both like, well, no, we don't want that. And I said, but that's what you're teaching her. Because if you teach her that she's not brown, she's not Hispanic, and she needs to see the brown Hispanic children as members of groups, and of course that makes her not one of that group, that she could possibly relate to them as characters. No, they're just over there. So the lesson that she learns is I can only properly relate to people who look like me.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, Deb. Hey, I've had, and it happened like it went a couple years, didn't happen, then it happened again this year twice,
Yeah.
where a black student will, I'll do a check on them at the college, or they'll call me usually. Hey, I have a big problem. My teacher wouldn't accept my test, accept my assignment. I said, really? And they said, they'll say, oh, it'll go something like this. Yeah, he's racist. And I said, oh. I said, well, what happened when you went to the department head and said they were racist? Well, I, he's racist because he didn't take my paper. I says, well, did he accept papers from other students late? Well, he didn't accept it from anybody. I said, well, wait a minute. It sounds like he didn't accept it from white students too. And they say, well, yeah. And they said, and this is interesting. They would say, well, it's the way he told me. And then I get to talking to them. I reverse them in that and tell them that you're getting an opportunity the same as everyone. And I talk
Mhm.
them out of it. And I realize that we're developing this victim, even though that person was a great student in high school, they picked up they were a victim somehow. And
Yeah.
that's a real issue.
Yeah.
Uh, but I don't know what we do about that. It's
And
a
that was the
problem.
issue I had with them, what they were teaching my daughter. I said,
Yeah,
my daughter was rightly upset. She got in
correct.
the car, and I'm proud of her. I'm really proud that my daughter does not want to learn your lesson. That is not what I teach my children at home. I don't teach my children that
Yeah,
they can't relate to people who don't look like them. I don't teach my children to be racist. And of course, both these women were just absolutely horrified.
they
They
probably were
thought
shocked.
I was the devil. Like I was Satan incarnate sitting there telling them that they were teaching my daughter to be racist. But to me, that's what they were doing. When you teach my child to see other people as members of groups, that is literally the inverse of what I am teaching them. And I told them I
Yes.
didn't approve and I didn't want to hear about it happening again. And they were very haughty about it. And it's like, you don't understand. And I said, no, I understand perfectly. And I don't agree with you. And I think you're doing actual harm to these students. And I'm going to make sure that I tell my daughter the same thing. So I certainly hope this won't back up on her. And if she does A, work for you, if she does your assignments and
Hmm.
completes her essays and writes things in a way that should deserve a good grade, I hope this conversation is not going to back up on my
Right,
child.
right. And what was that that Michael was asking us about?
So
Oh
he
yeah.
was asking about the esteem of Black teachers.
So I'll really quickly say this to you. My mother, rest her soul, she passed away in January 2021. She's a great woman.
Oh,
She's a great educator. She ran the Office of Black Catholics for years, helped students all back in DC.
mm,
And she, when she came out of high school, she wanted to be a teacher, but she had 4 or 5 others. They all became great teachers. So we've kind of
mhm,
lost that, Michael. We've lost this viewing of by young people that
mm.
it's a honorable profession, and it's all cultural, man. It's all hip hop culture. It's all of that, the authority, the man, and all that stuff.
Well, I'm
And
also seeing Black teachers, the teachers at least that are prominent, that you'll see on the internet or whatever. They seem to be activists, one and all. In other words, I'm
correct.
not really
It's
seeing,
coming out of
a,
that. Yeah.
yeah, at the forefront, Black teachers who are just there because they want to be teachers and not because they're there for social justice. There's a pretty prominent one. I can't remember her name, but she has a program called um, it's something woke kindergarten. She founded
Really?
no, she founded a program called Woke Kindergarten.
Really?
She is, I think, tr trans or
Yeah.
genderqueer or something.
Mhm.
She's Black, and
Mhm.
she is part of I don't know if it's Education 4.0 program or one of those grant recipients. And this is what she's teaching small children, 5 and 6-year-olds, and she's teaching them racial essentialism
Imagine that.
and all of these things. And I it makes me so sad because kids will believe they engage in magical thinking. They believe whatever you tell them. And when you have a student like you talk about your college student, somewhere along the line in his education,
Got
somebody told him
somebody like that.
this tone of voices equals racism. Somebody not accepting late assignments equals racism. Being on time equals racist or equals
Right, but that's
white. And
not,
we
of
know
course,
the Smithsonian said
that's
as much.
white. Of course, that's white.
Yeah, they said as much on their little infographic. Being on
Yeah, I
time is
saw that.
white. I'm like,
Yeah, I saw that.
this is the history, the Museum of the History of the African American at the Smithsonian.
It's
And
right
you're
in there.
saying
I
this.
know.
This is so incredibly offensive and racist that like it offended my sensibilities because I thought to myself of so many just humans I hold in such high esteem who happen to be black, right? You know, people like
Mhm.
heroes of mine, right? And I'm sitting there like, I'm pretty sure that Thomas Sowell likes to be on time. You know,
Oh,
it's like
yeah.
I'm pretty sure Walter Williams. I'm pretty sure like
Hey, my mom and dad would kill me if I wasn't. They would have
this is
jumped all over me.
ridiculous. It's absolutely Marva Collins did not teach her students
Yeah,
to be
no, of
late.
course not.
And
Of course
and
not.
and this is to me, I really so that's why I ask you, is there any sense that any of the parents that you deal with find it offensive too?
I do have some, and those are gonna become my leaders. They just don't realize it yet, what I'm getting ready to do. I wanna ask some people to visit some of these school board meetings and speak out. So there are some, and it's a beautiful thing to see when you find them. I have this parent, I should give her a shout out, I won't. She's just amazing how she is with her children, and she's a single parent. I'm like, she gets all this. She
Yeah.
gets this, and loves our program. And
See, I
so
feel
there
like
are some.
we need those
There, I got to
people.
get them in front. They got to lead. They got to become leaders. Is what I
At
think.
the same time, I feel really bad asking them to do that because,
Yeah, I
she's
know.
got
I know.
enough on her plate
I
and,
know.
I'm a mom and I feel like on the one hand you say, this isn't her responsibility. She didn't make this problem. It's not her fault that the Joe Bowlers of the world are being, condescending, racist, in my opinion, people with these low expectations. It's not, she's just trying to live life and get her kids through it and do whatever. But unfortunately, it's it is what it is. Like we've got to no one's going to believe me. I mean, they're not going to if I sit there and say this is racist, this is condescending, this is like not helping your children, the average, black parent's going to look at me and go, okay, Becky, whatever." Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
they're
that's
not going
why.
to listen to
Yeah,
me.
sure. And that's why people like me need to speak out. That's why I'm clearing my spaces in my life out to contribute at least 10 hours a week to fix this problem. It's very
Yeah.
important, and mobilize parents. And that probably is the ultimate answer to how to stop these classroom changes and to stop these school boards. As we learned from Loudoun County, we need to
Yeah.
organize our parents. Some of
Well,
these
it was
other
the
counties,
Asian parents. It was the Asian American parents who
exactly.
got together and said, "You're being bigots
That's when it
against
happened
our children."
in San Francisco, right? And
Yeah,
then
and in
look
San
what's
Francisco.
going on now. I think it's up near Minneapolis in the school district, where it's a
Yep,
beautiful video. We can go online, look at of these Muslim parents that are
yep.
saying we're not taking this stuff no more.
Yeah,
We
thank
are taking
goodness.
this transgender stuff anymore and this grooming you're doing.
Now,
So whatever.
John, we talked about all these wonderful things. We never got to talk about the Black Zero Index or the test scores or any of this stuff, but I think this was a really important
Yeah.
conversation because I really and even Michael's asking about, he says, what's the mix you see of the viewpoint? So is it like
Oh,
60-40?
great question. I think
Yeah.
that's the tell him that. I think that's the question that Avery was trying to ask me. We were having a serious conversation back and forth
Yeah.
about it. I'll bet you that probably right now I could say 10 to 20% understand this issue. And this is going to be equally confusing to you. Now that's before I really get in there and push. And those 10% saw my videos and came and stepped forward. So
Mhm.
that's why I'm staying on YouTube. So that's important. But I think it's about 10 to 20. There's
Mhm.
about 30% that would understand if I can figure a way to communicate it. They're too busy to see my videos, but when they come to me for services, it's probably the time. Like in the summer, I had a big parent meeting and talked
Mhm.
about these issues and created a great. I had a partner of ours, Educate California, and we talked about these issues. So I bet you there's another 30%, but there's probably another 60 that are just so because of the politics of it. Shout out to our last conversation. Are totally gone on hearing about this.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm starting to really believe in the power of infographics. Are you familiar with an organization called Courage is a Habit?
I'm
They
not, but I look
Yeah,
into it.
you should check it out because this is Alvin Louis. He lives in Indiana, but he was from I think
Write
California,
that
but
down.
he's got an organization, courageisahabit.org,
Mhm.
and they produce infographics. They produce sort of like pictorial, explainers that explain things like CRT, SEL, all
I'm
this
look
type
it
of
up.
stuff.
I'm look it up.
And what's so brilliant about this is they take in fact, they took SEL in the Chicago School District, and they got some researchers from Chicago to show over the 10 years that SEL, which is that, social emotional learning mindfulness stuff,
Yeah, I know
the
about it.
10 years they implemented this with a huge budget in the Chicago public schools, that achievement has plummeted. Now they're out there selling it like
Oh,
this
it
is going to
plummeted.
help
Okay.
achievement, but they show it like visually, so you can't ignore
Well, I
it.
like
It's
to
like
see that.
when you see the graphic, you're like, oh my God. So I think what needs to happen is somebody needs to take data like from the Black Zero Index
Like
and the
Zero,
NAEP tests, and then start talking about some of these issues, and after the introduction of this experiential learning, before the introduction of this experiential learning, what it looks like when Black students achieve, and just like represent it visually, and then you can hand out to parents or show them a graphic. I think you'd get audible gasps. I think people would be like, oh, one thing the parents don't know about, and this could be graph too, is historical Black achievement. So,
oh
for
yeah,
example, going back to even when there was segregation in schools, this is a dangerous one because people think you're
I know.
proponent of
Shelby Steele.
segregation,
Yeah, I know about this. Go ahead.
right?
But it was
Because you're
segregated
not, you're
learning.
not a
The
proponent of
test scores.
segregation. You're
Yeah,
just
I know.
saying
I know.
something happened.
We lost something when we integrated everything. I know.
Okay.
I've seen
And
that.
right. And of course, my pet theory is you can change geography, but you can't change hearts and minds overnight. And when you put children in a hostile environment where they're not yet welcome, okay, that's going to
That's right.
have a negative impact.
That's right.
There's
I've
no
seen
way
that.
around that.
I've
And
seen that.
we saw that with the early integration, and then with the busing later in the 70s. You saw in like Massachusetts, people throwing rocks at these poor kids.
And
Why
no,
would
New
you
in
do
New
that?
England. In New
Why would
England.
yes, why would you do that to children? That's abusive. Is your feeling good about yourself that you desegregated a school more important than their comfort and their safety? To me, that I watch those scenes and I'm just horrified. I'm horrified at the behavior of the people in the street, but I'm equally horrified at the do-gooders who claimed that sticking these poor kids on a bus and sending them half an hour away from home
Yeah,
to
me
a
too.
school
Yeah.
full of people who don't want them there was doing them good. No, if the
Yeah.
schools are different because they're not getting the same amount of money, give them the same amount of money, but leave them be. They're doing well. Leave them alone. We know that kids who go to school in their neighborhood, amongst people they're comfortable with,
Better.
etc. Why do you create discomfort?
We should just fix the funding issue,
That's
the
right.
equality issue, rather than trying to say separate was the problem. It was the
Exactly.
equality was the issue.
And if you could show them the historical data in a picture, then I think parents would start to be like, whoa, they would get the Shelby Steele message. Right. So I feel like if we
Yeah.
got a partnership of Alvin and Shelby Steele, and we put their little heads together and said, all right, here's my historical data.
Yes.
Here's my infographic makers. And you make this picture for your parents. And I think that would spread like wildfire. That's
Yeah.
my
Hey, I'm going to look
theory.
up that site, and I'm searching for ways with my videos and with my presentations. And we're getting ready to get back in person a lot with parents. We already can here in Lakewood.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna present that
But that's
to
a
those
talent
leaders,
I
to
do
the
not
leaders
have.
first. Present it
I
to the
have the
leaders.
analytical
Yeah.
skills and all this jazz conversation, but I am not good at like making infographics. But Alvin obviously has a team of people who are like phenomenal at it. And I always send people over there. I'm like, you want to understand what you need to know about the different types within a school, the types of abusers that are in there to your kids, whatever. Go over there. He's got a whole dossier of each one. You'll know what you're dealing with within 2 minutes of talking to them when you look at this cheat sheet. You know, how to like why you should oppose certain things. He makes it easy. Parents right now are overwhelmed. You got inflation, gas prices, blah, 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 blah. They need it easy. They need it like, here go. This
Hmm.
is what I'm telling you. And I'll tell you what's tragic is the left is very good at putting together easy in talking points and all
Yeah.
this, but they're lying.
They do it the
See,
other way, right?
they did, yeah. So they
I
take
know.
things that aren't, and it's much easier. You can easily make a picture when it's
Mhm.
not facts.
I
When you've
know.
like taken the data and you go, how about that?
Right.
That looks better for us. Let's frame it that way.
Right.
But if you take the truth and you're dealing with the truth, it's a little harder because obviously the truth is more complicated. The truth is not,
Many times, many
you
times.
know, it's not, look at these two variables. No, it's a lot different. In fact, it'll be fun for you as a math problem that's also about social justice, is y'all could sit down and figure out, let's count how many variables impact somebody's ultimate adult success. And let's
Yeah.
plot it on a graph. Now let's see if this variable is worth 10 points and this variable is, I mean, like, you could show them how the whole privilege thing of it is actually a lot more complicated than that.
Yes. Yes.
You could do that as a math problem. That'd be fun.
Yeah, you could. That's a good point. Good point.
But that's what my suggestion is, become a boy to make pictures. And testimonials are also good, getting people's stories, storytelling,
Right.
in every, I don't care what culture you're in, but I've heard that
Yeah, that's what I'm working on
storytelling
now. Yeah.
is a
Hmm.
really good method of getting people to understand, like, outliers and situations. What you said at the outset, the kids are getting left behind who are in that middle and high tier, like they're invisible, like they're gone.
Yeah, so
And
let's work with the ones we think are poor and needy, and design programs for everybody to fit everybody that way. And now you're
right,
just letting that person who's able just sort of settle in. Remember
get
that
get some
parents don't know
get
what
some
to put them in, they just sit there.
Right, get some of the people from those categories to tell their stories.
Mhm.
And, I couldn't take calculus, and then I didn't get the scholarship, and then this happened because they felt like we had to. Oh boy, I bet that would animate some parents too. I don't want that to happen to my kid, especially if they got a kid who's like still in elementary or, middle school. They have time to get, frustrated about that. So, I mean, these are just some ideas I had at the top of my head. But mostly I've kept you here for so long. And I mostly just wanted to get your take on this equity math stuff. And I think it will surprise the audience a little bit, some of what you're saying.
Well,
It's a little
great.
distressing, but
Yes. Well, there are people working. The good side is we're all aware of it. I'm
yeah,
identifying leaders here in LA to put a little pressure on these school boards. I'm pushing my parents, as you saw in the video, how to actually vote for school board. How do I pick
yeah.
school board people? All that.
Yep. And it's really, it's really important, I think, for parents to, you know, remember that, like, engaged is not automatically the same as learning. If you define engagement as
Yeah,
like,
busy work.
yeah, or even just like entertainment. There are a lot of kids who go, "I love my math teacher. They're
Hmm.
so much fun." It's like, "Well, what'd you learn today?" "I don't know."
Hmm.
"We
Yeah.
played a game though." Yeah. So anyway, but thank you so much for joining me. And thanks to everybody in the audience for all your comments and questions. Please like, share, subscribe, comment after the show is up. Want to get this seen by a lot of people, because what John is sharing with us is important information. And the more we keep these conversations going, hopefully the better we can serve our kids in educational spaces, to use the word, and help them go as high as they can go. That's all I want. I just want kids to be free to do whatever they
Me
can
too.
do.
Right.
That's it. Whatever it is. They might not be math geniuses, but they should get to the highest level they can personally get to. Nobody
Sure.
else should be deciding what that is when they're 6.
Hmm.
So that's my theory. Anyway,
All right.
thanks everybody. Thank you so much. I hope you all have a great day.
Thanks, Deb.
Thank you.